Nigeria, 1967. The air is already heavy with suspicion. The ground trembles with the march of soldiers, and the map of a young nation is about to be redrawn by gunfire. Only 7 years after independence, the dream of one Nigeria was already crumbling. The January and July coups had torn the military apart along ethnic lines. By May 1967, the eastern region led by Lieutenant Colonel Ojukwu had declared itself the Republic of Biafra. While the federal government in Lagos called it treason, the Biafrans called it survival. As the federal side launched a police action to bring Biafra back, Ojukwu and his war cabinet devised a bold but almost desperate plan. A plan that would bring the war to Nigeria's western doorsteps and test the limits of Biafra's ambition. That plan was the Midwest invasion, also known as Operation Torch. I will look at how the invasion unfolded, how and why the invasion failed, and how Ore refused to fall in peace. Welcome to this edition of Hispool Media. My name is Gabriel Adidia. A moment before we begin, I encourage you to like this video and subscribe to Hispool Media so you remain tuned to the history of Nigeria and the rest of the African continent. Thank you. When the Nigerian Civil War began in July 1967, the Biafran army was flush with early success. They had repelled the first federal assault across the Niger and morale was very high. But Ojukwu was aware that in the face of war, momentum could fade fast. Biafra was landlocked. The federal blockade has strangled oil export, food supplies, and arms shipments. But Ojukwu needed a game changer, something that will shift the geography of the war and shock the entire world. So, a radical idea emerged in Enugu's war room to open a western front. The plan was deceptively simple: cross the river Niger at Asaba, seize the Midwestern region, march on to Lagos, and force General Yakubu Gowon's government into surrender. To lead this audacious operation, Ojukwu appointed Lieutenant Colonel Victor Banjo, a Yoruba officer from Ogun State, who was initially detained by the federal government at Ikotekpene. Ojukwu had released Banjo from prison, after which he switched allegiance to Biafra. Banjo's Yoruba roots were seen as a political advantage. If the Biafran forces reached western Nigeria, Banjo might persuade the western region to defect or at least stay neutral. As one officer reportedly joked, "If we can reach Lagos before they find their boots, the war is over." Was this an audacious plan? The answer is yes. But war often rewards boldness, or in some cases, it punishes it spectacularly. Before we look at how Operation Torch unfolded, let us briefly look at the Midwestern region. The Midwestern region was created in 1963 from the old Western region and became Nigeria's most truly mixed region. Here, the Igbo, Urobo, Ishekiri, Esan, Edo, Ejo, and Yoruba communities lived side by side. Its military command, the 4th Area Command, was headquartered in Benin City. At the beginning of the war, the governor of this region, Lieutenant Colonel David Ejo, tried to keep the region neutral, declaring that we are not part of this quarrel. But neutrality in wartime is like standing in the middle of the road when two trucks are racing towards you. That is dangerous. By early August 1967, the federal lines were stretched thin across the Niger. Many Midwestern officers were of Igbo origin and quietly sympathetic to Biafra. Unknown to Ejo, some had either been secretly replaced or compromised. Arms were moved, radio communications cut, and roadblocks mysteriously unmanned. The chessboard was ready. Only one move remained, and that was about to change. The day was August 9, 1967, and the time was 3 a.m. as the sound of army trucks' engines hummed in the darkness. Thousands of Biafran troops, estimated between 3,000 and 5,000 men, began crossing the Niger River Bridge under the command of Victor Banjo, Major Albert Okonkwo, Lieutenant Colonel Mike Venso, and Major Humphrey Chukwuka. They carried small arms, machine guns, and whatever trucks they could muster. Many of them boarded civilian vehicles hastily repainted with military colors. One soldier later recalled, "We look more like mechanics going for a strike than an army going to war." But the invasion caught everyone off guard. Within hours, the Biafrans had entered Asaba, Agbo, and Benin City almost unopposed. The few Nigerian troops present were confused or defected outright. The Midwest Governor, Lieutenant Colonel David Ejo, narrowly escaped from Benin in disguise. While in the Midwest, the invasion spearheaded in three directions. The first was towards the north and led by Lieutenant Colonel Ivenso, who advanced towards Auchi and Agenebode and threatened Okene. The second was southward, led by Major Chukwuka, who pushed into Sapele, Warri, and Ugeli. And the last went westward towards Ore, the gateway to Lagos, and was led by Victor Banjo himself and Festus Akaga. By evening of August 9, 1967, the entire Midwest was in Biafran hands. It was one of the fastest territorial takeovers in modern African warfare. Biafran radio crowd with triumph. Announcers declared that the people of the Midwest have been liberated from Nigerian tyranny. Even international observers were stunned. For a fleeting moment, it seemed the unthinkable had happened. Biafra was winning. But the liberation quickly turned into something else. The next day, August 10, 1967, new Biafran flags fluttered from government buildings. Different propaganda posters declared freedom for the Midwest, but to many non-Igbo locals, it felt less like freedom and more like an occupation with an accent. Meanwhile, Governor David Ejo had fled. In his place, Ojukwu appointed Major Albert Okonkwo, an Igbo medical officer, as a new military administrator. Politically, this appointment was a disaster. The region's majority population, Edo, Urobo, Ishekiri, Ijo, felt alienated. The so-called liberators were mostly Igbo-speaking soldiers who now occupied offices, police stations, and broadcasting houses. At first, Banjo tried to maintain order and win the hearts of the people. He promised discipline and quick withdrawal after Lagos was captured. But the longer the Biafran forces stayed, the more suspicion festered. Locals, who initially tolerated the invasion, began to organize resistant groups. In Benin City, a chief named Michael Ojomo rallied over 600 men and about 180 women to harass Biafran soldiers. His group was formed on August 18, and soon afterwards an effective system of hit and runs was in operation. In Warri and Sapele, Ishekiri and Urobo militia started ambushing patrols. In Auchi, northern forces loyal to the federal side regrouped and attacked supply convoys. The once celebrated liberation had turned into an unwanted occupation. "The people we came to liberate were suddenly shooting at us," one Biafran officer later lamented. Meanwhile, friction exploded among the Biafran commanders themselves. Banjo, Okonkwo, and other officers disagreed on how to govern the region and how fast to push towards Lagos. Messages between Banjo and Ojukwu became tense, sometimes sarcastic. Ojukwu, paranoid of betrayal, demanded immediate progress towards the west. Banjo, realistic about his thinning supplies and long-exposed supply line, requested reinforcements. Their argument delayed the next move, and that delay would prove fatal. While Biafra argued in Benin, the federal government was regrouping. General Yakubu Gowon ordered Colonel Muritala Mohammed to form a counterforce fast. From Lagos, Ibadan, and Kaduna, troops were flown and trucked to the Western Front. Among them were men who would later become household names in the Nigerian military history. In the heat and dust of August, Muritala's unit dug in around Ore. a small town about 130 miles from Lagos, the final choke point before the federal capital. Ore was more than a town, it was a symbol. Whoever held on to Ore could threaten Lagos or protect it. By August 28, the stage was set for confrontation. Meanwhile, the Biafran soldiers, already weary and undersupplied, rolled westward in rickety trucks. Some had to push vehicles uphill while keeping their rifles balanced on their shoulders. Their morale was dropping. Their food, ammunition, and fuel were running out. A Biafran radio operator later lamented, "We had more petrol for the radio generator than for our trucks." At Ore, they met a wall of resistance. The first skirmishes began around August 21, 1967. Murtala Mohammed's troops, well armed and reinforced, engaged the Biafrans head-on. The fighting was fierce. For days, the forest of Ore echoed with gunfire. Despite their courage and determination, the Biafrans were stretched thin across a wide front. They had advanced too far, too fast, without the logistical muscle to maintain or sustain their position. Biafran commander Lieutenant Colonel Banjo reportedly urged a tactical withdrawal, but Ojukwu refused. He believes the federal side was bluffing, but they were not. By August 23rd, the Nigerian counter-offensive, dubbed Operation Torchlight, overran Ore. The Biafran troops broke formation, retreating eastward in disorder. Trucks clogged the narrow roads as panicked soldiers and civilians fled towards Benin. A war correspondent described the situation as a chaotic ballet of trucks, bicycles, and barefoot soldiers running for their lives. Ore had fallen, and with it, so did Biafra's grand gamble. The defeat at Ore shattered Biafra's western dream. After that defeat, federal forces advanced rapidly. From the north, Murtala Mohammed's column pushed down from Auchi. From the south, Benjamin Adekunle's 3rd Marine Commando Division seized Warri, Sapele, and Ogeli. By September 28, 1967, Benin City had fallen. The newly declared Republic of Benin, proclaimed earlier by Major Okonkwo, vanished overnight, possibly the shortest-lived republic in African history. One British journalist wrote dryly, "The Republic of Benin lasted less than a football match with extra time." As federal troops closed in, Biafran soldiers destroyed bridges and burned ammunition dumps to cover their retreat. Those who could fled across the Niger River, blowing up sections of Onitsha Bridge behind them. Others, cut off or wounded, discarded their uniforms and melted into the villages. Some were captured, some were executed as collaborators. In the end, the invasion that had begun with blazing confidence ended in ashes within weeks. The Midwest invasion changed the war, but certainly not in Biafra's favor. It turned neutral Midwesterners into bitter enemies of the secession. It galvanized the federal army and boosted morale after early losses. It demonstrated the perils of overextension, of fighting beyond supply lines and political logic. More importantly, it exposed the fractures within Biafra's leadership itself. This is evidence in the purges that followed the defeat. For instance, Banjo and several officers were later arrested and executed by Ojukwu on charges of treason. Whether those charges were real or a result of paranoia remains debated to this day. For the people of the Midwest, the invasion left deep scars. Cities like Benin, Sapele, and Warri suffered economic paralysis. Ordinary families fled, hid, and returned to shattered homes. A surviving trader from Benin City later told the Daily Times, "We didn't know who to run from, whether it was federal forces, Biafran soldiers, or hunger," he concluded. Click here for more interesting stories about the Nigerian Civil War, or here for other Nigerian military history. For more interesting stories like this, don't forget to like this one and subscribe to Hispo Media. Don't forget to share with your friends and family as well. And I'll see you in the next one. Thank you very much for watching. Peace.